of This Is Simulation, the Innovators series brought to you by Sim & Skills. I'm your host, Nicola, and it's my great pleasure to be able to talk to some fantastic people from the world of healthcare simulation. And today I'm really pleased to be joined by Linzi Foxcroft, who is from RealFX Simulations, and she's going to talk to us today about the world of Moulage. Now, many of you may use Moulage. Many of you might be hearing that word for the first time, but we're going to delve into Linzi's career and find a little bit more about Moulage. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, what is Moulage? Before we get into your history, how would you describe Moulage? Because it's so much more than special effects makeup.
I agree. Yes, so Moulage is the creation of simulated injuries using traditional makeup effects that you would associate with film and TV to simulate injury patterns for medical training, education, and training.
And it's quite a niche area of simulation. More and more people want to do it. How did you find yourself in the world of Moulage and healthcare simulation?
I very much fell into it. It was right place, right time. I did a degree in design for film and television. I had done some makeup, but not to the extent of what I do now. And I started volunteering with the military to do simulated casualties for pre-deployment training for a field hospital training centre. And it kind of went from there. It became something that I started to then really take a genuine interest in and specialise in, and then a business and a career was built on that.
It sounds like it almost became quite organically, that it's not something that you set out to do originally, but it's something that you found yourself in and then obviously found a love of doing.
Oh, absolutely. It was never a career option that I ever thought existed. And I think it's one of those things that you absolutely fall into. And I would say a lot of what I've learned through actually physically doing the job and supporting events, working alongside clinicians, training coordinators. It's been a massive learning curve, not just the skills I now have, but also the environment and the training and the purpose behind Moulage and simulation.
And your involvement in healthcare simulation hasn't just centred around Moulage. You've been involved in and ran businesses that many of our listeners and viewers products probably have and are using right now. So tell us a bit about that. What kind of areas were you working in?
So I initially started off by running a business that was pretty much a service provider of makeup artists, role play actors to support training. So that would be us turning up at an event, simulating casualties, doing real life training scenarios. And that then, as part of that, we were creating products to support that. We couldn't find the products we needed kind of in the industry, nor did we have the funds or the money to buy it ourselves. So we made a lot of it ourselves. So we would take, for example, we'd make a wearable Moulage, and then somebody would say, "Where did you buy that?" I would say, "Oh, we made it. Oh, can we have one, please?" So we then, over a period of time, had our own facility where we started manufacturing simulation and Moulage products, and that progressed to manikins. And we kind of transitioned from being a service provider to being a manufacturer of simulation products. But all the way along that, we'd always done Moulage training to teach others on how to create their own Moulages as well. So it was kind of, I guess, it was this journey, this progression of how,
like manufacturing by chance.
You
were serving, like, so you were servicing your own need. You had a need there. You had people you were working with who had a need, and you had, I guess, the equipment and skills and know-how, or at least the entrepreneurial desire, and an inventor's desire to want to solve your own problem.
And it was very much a customer, a client or a training department would come to us and kind of almost talk about their problem. For instance, we would have mannequins that were supporting an Ebola training exercise that they wanted, realistic mannequins that they could use within the training exercise. But then somebody else came and said, well, can they have an airway function? So we said, well, okay, well, we'll go away and do that. So my role then progressed very much into R&D. So in the latter kind of years of the last kind of, I would say, 5 to 10 years, my main role became product R&D development, and very much listening to and talking to the end user as to what it is they kind of, what do they need, and what areas of simulation are you struggling. And realism was one of the key things that we focused our mannequins on, was the human realism, and also the realism of injuries as well, so that they looked and felt realistic for the user.
And do you feel like that's something that's definitely changed in your experience of being in healthcare simulation, that there is a greater focus on the need for realism within simulation?
Absolutely. I think realism, I've seen really good scenarios and really good simulations, and I've seen it when it hasn't been done very well. And I think realism and attention to detail and ensuring that certain things are considered during that simulation enhances the overall delivery of the training and the outcomes that have been learned. And realism, particularly if it's an injury, one of the things that we used to consider was placement of injuries. So, if that injury is placed, say, injury to the chest, if it's placed in the wrong place, it has a different outcome in terms of clinical outcomes because of whatever internal organ it might have hit, or whether bleeding, or is it the impact on the patient. And then we would obviously then use standardised patients, so then it would impact their delivery of their performance within the Moulage. So realism was at every point from where we used to kind of work with the exercise planners about what we were going to be delivered, all the way through the event, and even afterwards, did we do that in a way that was the most realistic, to ensure that the simulation and the outcomes were I can't think of the word, were...
So like the learning outcomes that are being met by the Moulage, it's not just what perhaps some people consider like a nice to have.
Yes.
It's actually a really important part of delivering the scenario. And then does it almost sort of sit and fill a gap? We often speak to a lot of people in the simulation community who will say that they don't like high technology products being described as high fidelity, because high fidelity is much more concerned with psychological safety and the environment that you're creating, and the stress and the pressures and perhaps some of the processes that are being used and being put to the test, rather than just the technology itself. So if simulation educators, technicians are using lower technology mannequins, actually Moulage almost fills that gap, because it's helping to increase the fidelity, because you're seeing something that looks very, very real.
Absolutely. For example, if we were simulating a burn, and we would have to look at the mechanism of injury, and to what extent that burn had covered the surface of the body. So that realism, there's no technology involved. There is a process of being able to make sure that we are giving them those clues as to how much of the body has become burnt, what level of burn it is there smoke inhalation, is it around the mouth, is it around the nose? So we complement the mannequin, whether that's a high fidelity mannequin or a hyper realistic one. Moulage is the complementary important visual aid that would support the simulation and the learning outcomes, and it's so flexible as well. So we could do 10 burn scenarios in one day, but every single one of them is completely different, because we can chop and change how we present Moulage.
So it almost sounds like Moulage moves away from say, traditional special effects makeup, because it's both an art and a science.
Yeah.
Because in your creations, you're having to think, and perhaps, any particularly simulation technicians who are listening and watching, thinking about how they might apply it. You've got to really work in tandem with the educators delivering the scenario, because, like you say, you're actually considering how that burn came to be on the patient and the impact on the skin, and is it anatomically, physiologically correct, and on the body, and also for that type of injury.
Absolutely. And I think as well, the other difference is we are not just simulating those injuries on standardised patients, human skin. We're also doing that onto mannequins. And film and TV, that's not something, they may have props that would be sort of a body prop, but our mannequins, sometimes we would have in our scenarios that we used to support, we might have the same patient that would start off with a standardised patient and then transfer at a later date or a later time within the scenario into a mannequin. So therefore we would have to almost consider that patient pathway in terms of how that injury pattern or treatment pathway might change the patient. So we'd have to consider what might the mannequin look like in, say, 5 hours time after they've gone through treatment, once it's moved, if it's, say, going to theatres. So the difference there is we're thinking about the whole journey of the patient, and we're also thinking about, it's not just human skin, it's also mannequin skins as well.
Does that make a difference to how you're going to apply the moulage, if you're looking at the difference of how the skin feels and how it behaves when it's reacting with makeup? Yeah,
absolutely. It's really important, first and foremost, that we consider the right type of materials for use on skin, because for safety purposes and for allergies, we want to be confident that I trust the materials that I'm buying, that are developed purely for use on skin. We don't always get the opportunity to do patch testing and access to our volunteer role players or standardised patients that we may never see them before or after the event. So we have to consider that. So we have to consider the safe use and the correct use of the products. But we also then have to consider the application on mannequins and what their skin is made from. Is it a silicone skin? Is it PVC, rubber, latex? We then have to consider all that. And often those mannequins aren't ours. They belong to whoever is part of the training. So we have to be confident that in our role player, that whatever we do to them, their makeup is easily removed at the end. But also on the mannequin, we're not damaging that mannequin. So
I imagine that's probably a fear of lots of people to think that this is a thousands of pounds piece of equipment. You want to make sure that what you're applying is going to come off, and I guess the cleaning process is a huge part of it, because you need to make sure that you've got time for that, but also that equipment's going to be used again, so it's the right type of materials and the right type of cleaning materials
and technique as well. So there's the right kind of materials, the right kind of application, and the techniques that are involved to make sure that when it comes to removing and things like timing of removal, making sure that you've got a particular method in terms of removals. And when it comes to Moulage kit and the things we would carry and have in our kits, we have all sorts of weird and wonderful things that we're like, oh well, we've tried this before and this gets something off a mannequin because somebody, and there is a bit of learning from others as well, because we're like, oh well, I can't remember what it was it some sort of is it eucalyptus or something somebody said to use, or lavender oil or some sort of essential oil worked, and we were like, we need that in our kit then, because you just never know when.
It smells good too.
Sometimes though, the mannequins that we used to work with would look better after Moulage from us than they did before we got them, because like, oh, we've cleaned your mannequin, it was better than it was when we got it.
Have you ever had a horror story where the makeup didn't come off?
It's not a horror story, but it's more of a funny story. So I was working on an exercise in Germany, and it was a simulated field hospital exercise. So we were getting rotational patients coming through, and we were doing the moulages, and then they were going into the hospital complex, and they were being in there real time. So it might have been in there for 24 hours, 48 hours before they were casevaced out of the country. And then that would be then come back to us, and they would then have more makeup on and recycled and go back in. So this one particular person came back to us, and I said, "Oh, you're back for another Moulage?" "Yeah, okay." She said, "Oh, so the previous Moulage had been a gunshot wound to the abdomen with a exposed bowel. So there was a nice loop of bowel hanging out. We'd made it out of silicone, it applied to her skin, and that had been like 3 days earlier. And then she came back in. I was like, "Oh, just by the way, before you do this Moulage," she said, how do I get this off?" I said, "Sorry, what do you mean?" She said, "Oh, I've still got the Moulage on my stomach." I was like, "But you've
for 3 days.
For 3 days." I said, "But you've showered and you've had food and everything." "Oh yeah, I got in the shower and I've cleaned all the blood off it, so it's all clean." So I was like, you just peel it off." She's like, "Oh, I didn't know how to."
She was worried how to take it
She
off.
didn't know how to take it off, and nobody, we weren't able to tell her at the time. And because she'd been in the hospital complex a couple of days and been treated like a patient, she'd come out and gone, "I don't really know how to take this off." But it was obviously like a testament to our Moulage that she'd gone through a whole scenario for a couple of days, still had the Moulage on her stomach, had a shower, had some food, had a sleep, come back to
it stayed on.
And it stayed on. So we were like, well, if there was one way to test the Moulage and how long it lasts on skin, then that's it. So yeah.
Lady. I mean, I've had the privilege today of being one of your standardised patients for some work that we were doing, and you've applied Moulage to me. And I think one of the things we talked about whilst we were doing it was the care and attention that you need to take when you're using standardised patients, because you've got a human at the other end there.
Yeah.
Some of the techniques that you're doing, some of the materials are cold, you've got sprays and things, some of the things you're doing around the face. So what kind of tips would you give to people when they're working with standardised patients and Moulage for those things that they've got to consider to help standardised patient feel comfortable?
I think it's communication. So first and foremost, if you've got time, have a conversation as a Moulage specialist. Say, have you had Moulage before? If it's a yes, we've done it loads of times before. Okay, is there anything that worries you? Is there anything that you have had a problem with before in the past, or when it comes to materials that you've used? And then obviously I'm going to explain to them what I'm going to be doing. So, and particularly if it's around the face, you're often, can you just close your eyes? Because I don't want to. And so therefore, if their eyes are closed, they're not actually being able to watch what I'm doing. So therefore, my communication increases. So I would explain to them what I'm doing throughout the process so that they're aware, so that they're not they're not flinching as I'm coming towards them. Because like you say, it's not like things are wet, drippy, sticky. And it's also, is anything really uncomfortable? Particularly when it comes to like blood running down the face, I will watch to make sure it doesn't go in the eyes. And I will say, look, it might go in your mouth. If it goes in the mouth, it's edible. It's completely fine. You had that in your mouth today. And you're like,
nice.
But it's just that communication, and it's that just reassurance that everything's going to be okay. But it's also, if something doesn't feel quite right, let us know. Like if something starts to feel really uncomfortable and genuinely uncomfortable, then please do, come and say something to one of us. It's very rare that we have I've never really experienced anybody having a reaction, but it's still something that I'd want them to feel confident to come and speak to me.
And is that because the types of products that you're using, these are products that you trust? And I think a lot of people would have seen you've got certain websites where you can go to for cheap and cheerful things. Would you always advise to stick with reputable products?
Yeah, 100%. And I think things like even the way you handle those products and care for those products, I'm very careful about. I use specific applicators, so I'm not putting my fingertips, I'm not handling the product all the time. Lids stay on. So that I'm and I often have like little pots and tubs where I decant, so that I'm almost treating it as in like I'm taking out what I need to use on the skin, and then rather than kind of dipping into pots or putting my fingers in or contaminating, because that for me is the biggest risk. And the one thing I will not ever have in my kit anywhere near me is anything that contains latex. That is a big no-no in Moulage. It's a known allergen, so I wouldn't have anything latex. My go-to is silicone. It's a great product to be able to use onto skin. I avoid the things that are known allergens, and I trust the products that I have tried and tested. And then communication is really key, just to make sure that they are, and then also the communication about removal. How am I best to remove this? Because I tend to find that people worried then that they've removed it and their skin's a bit blotchy and red and think, oh, I've had a reaction. It's like, actually, I think it's just the action of removing it and maybe being a bit more forceful than you would do normally if you're just washing your face, because you're physically removing something. If it looks a bit red, then we kind of would expect that, and that will just reduce in time if you're kind of being a bit vigorous with the washing and scrubbing.
I've had a very vigorous wash and scrub over the past 2 days, so I know I can testify that if you're taking it off gently, it will come off. It's fine, but
it will.
So you will have that natural bit of redness.
Yeah.
And it's the same, I guess, with the mannequins as well. Like, you were very careful in the way that you were choosing to clean down the mannequin, the silicone skin, to make sure that it is coming off well, and even doing some patch testing as well, just to do that double check that on the mannequin it's not going to do anything bad.
I think the other important thing to consider is my welfare too, or the welfare of my other technicians. I'm really keen that I handle these products all day long, so I come into contact with them more than anybody else. So and everybody's like, oh, why do you wear gloves? I was like, well, I want to be able to feel the product. I want to be able to apply it with using my fingertips, and I will wear gloves if I'm likely to get really messy, like if I'm applying a lot of blood. But I'm touching it and come into contact with it all day long. So I need to be completely confident that the things that I'm exposing myself to is also safe. So I would have confidence to put it onto you.
And watching you do Moulage, it almost seems like your tools are almost like an extension of you. So if you're putting those gloves on, because often you were using your hands to create textures, you've got then a different type of texture on your hands. I was quite amazed to see like the difference in just the tightness of a sponge. If it's a much more looser sponge with lots of holes in it, you're creating a very different effect to something else. And I think perhaps that's, for anybody who's fairly new to Moulage, understanding the tools, any artistry, like you've got to really think about the tools that you've got, because they're going to make a big difference.
Tools are really important, and all your accessories that come with it, whether it's a sponge, a brush, your fingertips. I think as well that is about speed, and I tend to find that if I've got a lot of moulages to do, I find that using my fingertips and using my hands and being able to be really tactile actually aids speed. If I'm having to go back and find brushes and clean brushes and I have my particular ones that I really like, my go-to spatulas and brushes, but no, generally I feel like I can work at speed as well using my hands to work with.
And for anybody listening and watching, Moulage, they've been asked to do Moulage, and they just feel as if, I'm not an artistic person, I've never been able to do anything. That's me. I don't really like doing my own makeup. But it's often a requirement, particularly of technicians, that they're going to need to do that. So what would you say to anybody, sort of the first steps to take if you are going to sort of head into this world of starting to apply Moulage to either mannequins or standardised patients?
I think don't be afraid of it. It's something that you can kind of have quite a bit of freedom with in terms of injuries. And if you're given a scenario, you're given a particular injury that you are being asked to create, first of all, research it. If you've got people around you that are can help you to understand what that might look. First of all, get something credible that you can copy from. So if you've got, whether it's I'd be careful using other simulated images unless they're really good quality ones. Or if you can get access to a real injury that you can then copy from. Look at the tone, colour, texture, kind of then break that down. So for example, if it's a bruise to the cheek with a cut, you can split that into two. I've got my bruise, which I would apply first to skin, and then I've got my cut. So how can I do those? And then how can I work them together and give myself enough time as well? And if I can practice it in advance, have a practice of it. And then obviously materials and equipment are really key because they will do half the job for you. And then I think when I've done training, I tend to find the people that are on my training courses, I have not that I have two, but I can have a variety that come from so many different backgrounds. I tend to find the ones that try and do it too perfectly are the ones where actually it doesn't look as good. The ones that maybe just go a bit more free with it and are a little bit more, there's less perfection there. Actually end up with a better result. No,
getting it perfect. They're just
no.
having a go.
Yes, so don't be too worried about perfection, and just have a go at it and try and practice it, but plan it and get some really good resources in place to be able to copy from something that makes sense to you, and just break it down. That would be my kind of advice.
And it was interesting what you said there about the communication that you need to have with the rest of the team. If for example, you're the technician doing the moulage, to speak to the educators, to speak to your sim leads, finding out exactly what it is that they want from this moulage. Because as we said earlier on, that clinical importance, like when you're practicing, I guess it doesn't matter so much, but you want your learners to understand what, you know, if you're thinking about bruising, because they may have to identify perhaps from a safeguarding need, how old is this bruise? You know, is this a recent bruise, is this an older bruise? And I'd imagine with bruising, the colour spectrum that you go through with it with a bruise is gonna change. So getting all that, being really clear on that information before you start diving into it is important.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of the training events that I've supported in the past, the ones that have been really successful are the ones with really good scenarios, where that scenario is has the outcomes for kind of the clinical outcomes, but it also has the outcomes from a moulage perspective, even has the information for the standardised patient. And I find that when that all comes together as a really well thought out scenario, it's really helpful then for me to ensure that my part, which is the moulage, is the most realistic. And then obviously there's all the communication. So yeah, I think if I turn up to a training event, they're like, just do this, this, and this, and it's really vague, I find that I'm more likely to just go and do my thing.
Which isn't necessarily what it was that they were intending.
But how do I know that? What I do might be actually better than what they thought they were going to get, or it might be completely off-piste as to what they wanted. But if there's really clear communication and there's a really good scenario that considers all aspects of that moulage, then that's for me is where I've found the most successful training outcomes from it.
I've always, going back to my teaching days, was always really fascinated on how the learning environment is such a big factor in the application of learning, and that there's a school of thought and theories about that the learning environment is almost like a third teacher, that you're going to obviously learn from your teachers, learn from your peers, and you learn from the environment. And I would imagine that moulage is such a huge important factor of that, and the accuracy of what it needs to look like is important, because it is going to teach the learners.
I wouldn't be where I am today at all without kind of those people that I've met along the way who have been so supportive, you know, in helping me to understand. You know, I had no clinical background whatsoever. So I have to understand the clinical side of it. I have to understand anatomy, physiology. I have to understand what happens to the body when it is injured in a particular way. I couldn't have done all that without the support from many, many, many people along my journey in the last 20 years who have kind of taken their time out to educate, support, and kind of explain to me. And that's what I want to do. I want to pass on that now, because I didn't go to university to learn this. I didn't do a degree in, you know, human sciences or medicine, but actually I know enough to do my job really well. But I only know that because I've kind of been a fly on the wall or been directly educated, just supporting so many events.
And so with your company now, RealFX Simulation, a big part of what you do is the training of others. So what is that like, training people? How do you kind of structure how you do the training?
So I think the training is in kind of two parts. One is education on materials, how to use materials, best practice, and how to get the best out of. So it's almost like you don't need a kit full of lots and lots of different things. What can you do with that one product, and how can that be kind of like, what can we do? So for example, bright blood it's not just used as a blood effect, it can be used in burns. So how can we best how can we best use those products? So products is one thing, technique, application is another, and then it's understanding then the impact that the medical side of that has on that. So if we're simulating an injury, why are we doing it? There has to be a why and a how. So why are we doing it in a certain way? And then always thinking about, this is just not for entertainment purposes. We're not doing this for film and TV entertainment. We're also not doing this to sit behind a camera. We're doing this for somebody to physically, who is a trained and educated person, potentially a clinician, who's going to come over and actually assess your injuries that you've created and the scenario around them, to assess, to get the best outcomes out of their training. So in my training, I want to ensure that that's the understanding of how we're going to go about. So if we're going to create an injury, I'm not just going to say, oh, we're just going to create a laceration. We're going to create that injury, that laceration, based on a scenario, and we're going to look at anatomy, physiology, what happens to the skin, and also then robustness, because there's also an element of treatment application. It's got to withstand some sort of treatment. So, for example, chest seals, one of those things that everybody says to me is, how do you keep a wound on under a chest seal? So yeah, this is the kind of thing. It's not just about doing makeup, and that is a smaller part of the big part of the training that I would write into, that I kind of, I can't think of the word now,
that you would kind of put into that whole kind of collection of resource that you're
Yes.
delivering. It's not just about the application of makeup, it's about the whole process that's going with it from start to finish.
Yeah.
So have you got one piece of kit, and this could either be your tools or your makeup that you were using, that you think, I really couldn't do without this when I'm doing Moulage, I can't? Your hands?
Probably my hands is one thing that without my ability to be, I broke my hand at Christmas, and I was so pleased that I'd actually broke my hand in the festive period where I had no work on, because I was like, suddenly realised, like, what would I do? So apart from that, obviously, if it was to go to a Moulage product, I'd say silicone is my go-to, because it's so versatile, and we can apply it on skin, we can thin it out, we can thicken it, we can colour it, we can use it in we can create forms with it, we can create task trainers with it, we can add it to skin, we can create. So silicone is I mean, I don't think I could be doing my job as well if it hadn't have been for understanding the capabilities of how we can use silicone. And really, I think we've created our own way of using silicone within Moulage that I think is different to how it's used in film and TV as well, because we've worked with it for such a long time that we've kind of created our own little
develop our own techniques,
that we use it specifically for the purpose of simulation. So yes, my hands and silicone.
So have you ever experienced a situation, and I guess for a lot of clinicians training, seeing Moulage could actually be their first experience of seeing something quite graphic?
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced a situation where you've created something so realistic that someone's become a bit of a cropper to fainting, or it's just like thrown up in the corner of the room?
I've got a few stories. I know. I told you one of them about somebody fainting, but one was back in my very early days, and we had amputee actors that would work with us. So we had specialist prosthetics, and we was working with the military, and we were in a camp, and they were doing basically an IED explosion in the camp. And this was an actual camp that was being used for the training. So there was nobody else on this camp other than the training troops. Apart from, they had the NAFI, and nobody told the two girls working in the NAFI there was going to be a simulated training exercise happening that would be, where there would be real life simulated casualties. So we had turned up at nightfall, so it was pitch black. Got the two casualties out of the vehicle, placed them outside the entrance to the NAFI, threw blood around, put their severed limbs around. The simulated bangs went off, and the two girls came out, the two staff members came out, and we realised that nobody had been in and told them.
Was that screams? Was
Yeah, they were really upset. I think, they were quite upset, and we had to kind of take them to one side and say, well, not me. This was not my, wasn't. We didn't know they were there. Yeah. So obviously the people in charge of the exercise, communication. So the people in charge of the exercise had to go and like say, oh, I'm so sorry, and actually then for the next, I think it was about 3 weeks, we kind of. We did that scenario every other night for a couple of weeks. So they ended up like being our audience then and kind of watching it and being fascinated in it. Yes.
Being like filled with excitement and seeing it happening.
I'm pretty sure one of the medics went and took them a bunch of flowers the next day just to apologise. So I'm really sorry we didn't tell you. But yeah, things like that have happened where actually, but that was more of just not communicating. But realism and sometimes it's been, people have come up and really genuinely said, it was a really good exercise. Like that's the best Moulage I've ever seen, and I got a lot out of that. So thank you. So there's an awful lot of reward. Like I feel very privileged.
And I guess for anybody who's doing Moulage as well, that might be something. Most people might look at it as like, it's a bit of a barrier. I'm not artistic. I don't know how to do it. But if you can put in the time to practice, what you get back from it yourself personally is feeling really part of that scenario.
Yeah.
You managed to create something, be creative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being able to create something, be part of it, deliver the training and be part of that team. And then, when you hear the debrief at the end and, been many times that they said, oh, thank you to the, the Moulage team, it was really good and we got a lot out of that. And that, is, I go away from, the support and I did my job and I did it good today and I'm it was really good and I'm going to go home and
I guess like you were saying with the
feel
example
proud.
that you gave with the poor girls at the naffy, is that a lot of simulationists will understand about the importance of doing pre-brief and debrief. And I guess it all feeds into it because if they know what it is that you're going to be creating, and I guess from your point of view working with the standardised patients, you're pre-briefing them about what's going to happen to them, how it's going to look. Because I know when I first looked in the mirror at my face following an injury, there is a sort of a moment of shock of like, oh my goodness, that's how I look.
You wouldn't see yourself like that.
No.
And if you did and it was real, you'd be, the panic that would set in. And in some ways, that's helpful to the standardised patient. It helps them get into character. So if you were to, obviously I did those injuries to your face, and if you were to then go into a scenario, you're like, well, I believe that I'm injured and now I can act out because I can see my injuries, I can react to them. I know where the pain is because I know whether you've done the injury. So it's also helpful to the standardised patient because it gives them guidance as well in terms of I physically got a bruise to my wrist, so do not touch it. Like I'm in a lot of pain.
It's
and
sort of that suspending disbelief, isn't it? That you, for everybody involved in the scenario, whether they're playing a patient, whether they are the learner who's got to be a nurse or a doctor or a paramedic, they've got to be immersed enough to be able to step out of this, that I'm a student, it's now I'm actually being a clinician in this scenario. And I guess Moulage is a huge part.
Huge part of it. And, I'm very privileged and, to have been part of it. And if I can continue to help and educate and support, and like you say, anybody it's new to Moulage and they don't really know where to start, and therefore I want to be there to help. I've got a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, and I kind of want to share that now.
And we're really lucky that Linzi is joining us this year for SimTech Live. We're really pleased that you're able to join us. He's going to be delivering workshops to the simulation technicians that are coming. Is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to, being able to work with technicians at SimTech Live this year?
I think I took some time off and I had a little boy, and I feel like in the last 12 months setting up RealFX Simulation, I'm getting back into kind of a place where I missed for a while because I was in R&D, and then I took some time off, and I'm just really looking forward to kind of just being back in that around people that we've all got this familiar purpose, and simulation is something I never thought I would you know, it's a passion. So I'm just looking forward to spending time back in the room a little bit and meet people that maybe I haven't seen for years, and then new people who don't know anything, you know, who've never met me, and or don't really know about Moulage. And I'm just really looking forward to kind of just, I don't know, being back where I belong. Back to it, yeah.
Well, I'm so pleased that you could join us today for This Is Simulation. If you are interested in any of Linzi's training through RealFX Simulation, we're going to put some links down below the video. We'll put some links onto the website and onto the social media posts as well, so you'll be able to follow. But where is your website? Where do they need to go to find you?
Yeah, www.realfxsimulation.com.
Thank you, and thank you so much for listening and watching today.